out through the fallout with the greatest of aplomb. When your white count's getting higher, hurry, don't delay. I'll hold you close and kiss those radiation burns away. Crawl out through the fallout, baby, to my loving arms. Through the rain of strontium-90. Think about your hero when you're at ground zero, and crawl out through the fallout back to me. Crawl out through the fallout, baby, you know what I mean. Crawl out through the fallout, 'cause they said this bomb was clean.
Hello and welcome to the Contemplation Deck. I am your host, the Stern Golem, and this is the pilot episode. And this will also be known as the Europe and the Great Gunpowder Race, and it's based off a YouTube video by a guy called History Clarified, and it was called, if I can remember it now, off to a very casual start for my first episode. It was called Why Was Europe Better with Guns? By History Clarified, and he's an American bloke, but he had, like a lot of there happens to be educated Americans out there, and and apparently sometimes they can give us some very good perspectives. And this guy, he challenges a lot of preconceptions to do with, culture, race, and, conceptions of, just the idea that, anything in really ridiculous, in particular political slant we see out in modern times nowadays, on why Europe dominated the world, or why was Europe always better with guns. And the central thesis is, well, gunpowder started in China, and they actually had artillery using. It wasn't just for ceremonial display, which is popularly known, but they also had artillery, like firework artillery. So why didn't they conquer the world? And the question is predominantly geography this guy comes up with, and the impetus to want to develop more and more sophisticated artillery and handheld firepower. And so it goes into a bit of parallels on Japan as well, being like having geography very and a kind of structure of society very similar to medieval Europe in the 1500s, and why Japan developed weaponry that excelled in Asia, and they went on to develop an empire in the 1800s. Why that went the way it did. So it's interesting to see this perspective on how geography really just developed, was the secret ingredient which just developed everything for Europe. And so I brought on my friend Fish and Jish, who I happen to know a lot in real life, who is almost like a history major. He's an arts guy. I'm an engineer. I'm just a hobbyist in this stuff. He's actually done a degree in it. But I thought he started a Substack. He's underrated. He does not have nearly as many as the mega amount of subscribers I have. I think I have 87 subscribers now. Most of which, I've either, if they're on the paid plan, I've complimented you. So, you've mean a lot to me, but I'm trying to make some cash at some point. But you mean a lot to me, so the moment I'm more complimenting you. And then there's also the free people, and I can't love you. I, can't say how much I love you. So, love and appreciate you. Let's say that. I'm not developing any parasocial relationships here. So all I can say is welcome Fish and Jish, and chuck him a subscription if you can. He'll be in the description for the episode as well. LinkedIn as a collaborator, but I thought I'd give him the floor right now.
Yeah, I'm Fish and Jish. So I'm mainly on Substack, though, as a hobby on the side of my job and all. So, indeed, I did majored in modern history, and my main minor was politics. So as you can tell, my blog is mainly on geopolitics, history and geography, occasionally some of, whatever I feel like writing in the day, including politics. Yes, and I've known the Stern Golem for quite a few years now. So yeah, no, we go back far. Yeah, I only have about 3 or 4 subscribers, but yeah, because Mr. Golem, he does a good job. He puts out more articles and he plugs a lot more. Yeah, no, I'd say I think there was also a pretty good description that Mr. Golem said about the Gunpowder video. If I'm able to say, Mr. Golem, on what I thought of the video as well. Yeah, so no, I agree to pretty much all of it. There was like one small part which I think he elaborates later on, though, that I didn't agree with at first, which was about the amount of farmland, like in Europe, for example, because there was definitely enough farmland in China and just say India, especially in the Hindu-Gangetic Plain, or in China in the Yellow, Yangtze, and Pearl River deltas, which I wrote about in one of my blogs as well. But I think he does kind of elaborate on that. That did count for China and India, or at least China. But then, the other factors that didn't work so well for China was that, especially because it's more of a mono-ethnic country and empire, including back then, they were mainly fighting other nomads and more spaced out groups. So, at least heavier gunpowder and artillery and siege weapons weren't used much, if at all. And it was, just more about going over vaster plains and probably more sort of tactile weaponry. I do agree, like the video is quite well done to be a lot more impartial and less sort of political or even Eurocentric, because even some of the subjects I did on modern history, so I was educated in the Macquarie University, which is in northern Sydney. One of the subjects there, which was actually considered a flagship subject, an absolute crap subject in my opinion, but I'll tell you why maybe in future, called Big History, which broadly speaking was using a world history lens on pretty much quite literally every single historical event. I remember the professor there tried telling us that things like gunpowder and other sort of technologies that particularly helped Europe become hegemon over much of the world in the voyages of exploration and the age of colonization, pretty much just tried saying that a lot of usually Asian civilizations didn't have the right ideological, even political mindset. I think it was a lot more of a sort of stretched point of view, and it doesn't really answer, though, why before the age of gunpowder, for example, why East Asia in particular or India as well, was such a capital of global innovation. I mean, after all, as the video says, it was the Chinese that invented gunpowder in the first place. So I think this is that the video does much better in being more impartial and also more fair, because often these factors, especially with something as broad technology as gunpowder, evolves like any sort of evolution because of factors that aren't so able to be controlled, like in this case, geography, sometimes geopolitics, I suppose, amounts of food, obviously climate, and yeah, so those are my thoughts on the video. I take it back to Mr. Golem.
Thank you, Fish. So that's exactly it. I was really interested to hear a bit about your course there, actually, because we all have our own opinions about the Australian education system. Look, we do have world-class universities, but as I've recently written about how to get into university and the whole high school certificate we have in our native state of New South Wales, that it is a bit of a farce, considering that like we basically have to compete for reserved places, because there's a reserved place which earns the university most of their money, and then there's the domestic place which they're basically doing on government loans, and whether or not we pay it back once we get above a certain income threshold, if we get a job, that's when they get their money back. So it's a case of, well, we can make more money instantly from just charging international students like shit tons of money, or we could wait on potential IOUs from domestic students who are based on a government loan. And so we got a and we also pay a lot less than the international students. So they're in they do have a disadvantage for coming here, so I will admit that. But what I'm trying to say here too is since they're in much greater number and individually they have a lot less rights than we do. I've lived with international students myself. I guess I'm getting off on the topic here. I'm meandering a bit, but what I'm trying to say here is it's a bit of we all like to complain a bit, but we are world-class universities. We are like some of the best in the world. So, America has similar problems in like even Harvard and stuff like that right now, as some of my subscribers like Professor Axelrod have told me. So I can't exactly say that, we're the worst place in the world. But, all I can say is that like a lot of Western universities now just are kind of like marketed towards bringing in international students because that's how they earn a lot of money. It's a corporatized university system. Not to get all like, Bolshevik, Menshevik, socially democratic, communist manifesto on you, but it's just more. I thought I'd just mention that kind of stuff because we've got to keep a realistic mind about this stuff. It is a little bit insidious in my view. But regardless, I thought I'd cover the video a bit more. And basically what's happening here is the gunpowder, as we've established through Fish, kind of like giving his criticism of the subject, that it starts in China. And this view that we have is in like within the Eurocentric sphere of analyzing everything through the Western canon, specifically through the development of ideology in modern nation states, doesn't really cut the materialistic aspect of what actually happened on a material level and on from a geographer's point of view. And so if you look at it just through the technology and geographical features and like human ethnography, you get a lot more of an insight into what's going on a material level than if you were just simply looking at it through the through the lens of the development of philosophical texts. And that's why in some ways I've been more interested in this video, this History Clarified video when it came about, because it just departed from ideology. It was actually a breath of fresh air for me because there's so many videos on YouTube and articles in Substack dedicated to the development of philosophical thought. And the thing is if you went to a local on the street in like say Southeast Asia, in Thailand, in Cambodia, Vietnam, you start talking about John Locke, and you start talking about Thomas Hobbes, and you start talking about how great someone like Edward Hume was. They would look at you funny. But if you start talking about the history of guns and you start talking about the history of empires, they start really understanding. And that's what's really, really interesting, is because I didn't understand that places like Thailand were once a massive empire within Southeast Asia that used to send, that actually had a formidable army and that were actually sending war elephants to Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War as gifts.
No, that I didn't know.
Yeah. It was very, very interesting. Basically, having to deal with all this stuff related with, they had such a formidable supply, and they synthesized both Hindu cultures from the religion of India and like the Chinese sort of like minority had like provided a lot of, like financial and success and a lot of economic boom to the country. So they had the traditional Chinese Buddhist culture, but then the royal court was based on Hinduism. And so they had this weird synthesis of two cultures, which then led them to dominate most of Southeast Asia for ages. And they were the only country within Southeast Asia which was never dominated by an empire. And so to this day, I learned from a trip to Thailand that the king of Thailand is richer than the current British monarch, and like literally would spend a lot of time over in Germany, like kind of like violating some time, by modern standards, like like suppressing native Thai rights during the protests and stuff like that from the hills of Bavaria in expensive hotels, and the European Commission and German Parliament got very pissed off at him for doing that. So I've handed over to Fish and Jish for his comments on that, but I just thought like, look, we lack, there's so many interesting parallels and so much history that you can like study within Asia, which kind of like parallels our own hunger for history within Europe. It's not really, it doesn't make a lot of sense to think of things from European ideological points of view, because you just miss out on all the fun. So let me just pass over to Fish and Jish for his.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I've personally always been, I've always been interested in most histories around the world. I know that's kind of a boring answer, but definitely if I focused more into it, it's mainly been sort of East Asian history, because I've always liked how advanced and innovative they've been, and because of the sort of obviously living in a Western country with Mr. Gollum in Australia. Most people just usually focus on the European aspect of things, which is obviously fine. But if it goes to the expense of other countries, then that's another thing. I agree with Mr. Gollum as well about what he said about the larger empires in Southeast Asia that are probably not taught about so much, and that the locals in those countries, of course, will be able to refer to a lot more. Mr. Gollum also reminded me, as per that video as well, the caveat they showed in that video was during the Sengoku Den, or the Warring States period in Japan, when they did actually get a lot of gunpowder weapons, and like in games such as Total War Shogun showed all the sort of factions, and they all had their own castles, and in effect as well, probably even before then, coincidentally, the Japanese had some sort of feudal system. They had a warrior class too, lords and equivalent of barons, just instead, samurai, daimyos, and shoguns, respectively. And they showed that well in the video why they also did not, keep that up, because the soon-to-be Tokugawa shogunate that took over isolated the country, and that was largely to keep control as well. And apparently there's also to keep back the Jesuit influence from Japan, which is becoming a real existential crisis, at least according to the Tokugawa rulers, which is interesting as well, because that's definitely a theme, at least with pretty much all other East Asian cultures as well, because even the famous Ming Dynasty, which maybe could have also broken the mold and gone colonial as well, with those such as Cheng He or Zheng He, however you want to pronounce him, famous treasure fleet explorer who went through Southeast Asia. There's also records of him, for example, getting a giraffe from the Swahili coast to take back to the emperor. And I think ultimately he went at least to the edge of the Red Sea, so towards what would have been back then as well as at least coming up to the Ottoman Empire, to the point that did actually get influence in sort of mainstream audiences as well, unfortunately through the pseudo-historical Gavin Menzies, though, if anyone remembers his rubbish books. I think it was 14... I don't remember which date it was, like 1463 or something, the date that China discovered the world, and there was some other one. But anyway, that's probably the only time that lens gets there. But at that point, that was important because the Ming Dynasty, being the last sort of Han-ruled imperial dynasty, I think they got to the height of their technology, which would have included gunpowder weapons, and Zheng He's voyages showed that China was actually starting to explore outward and see an importance of the outside world around them. Whether that would have made them go colonial or in their own sort of voyages of exploration, that's obviously up for debate. But the main point is, not long after that, which ironically characterized the decline of the Ming Dynasty, they started shutting down everything. Maybe not as extreme as the Tokugawa shogunate, but essentially stopped all of these sort of explorations, the sort of almost Confucian attitude of looking inwardly, all of that sort of shut down everything in China. And the Qing were even worse when they took over because, ironically as well, probably more for a similar reason to the Tokugawa shogunate, because the Manchu, who are a very tiny minority power ruling over such a vast Han population, apparently wanted to keep down the sort of technology and the influence in the outside world as obviously a direct means of control to keep their otherwise arguably tenuous hold in power there. And that didn't really stop until the latter half of the 19th century, also, deep into the so-called long century humiliation. I would also say I know examples in Korea as well, which was aptly named the Hermit Kingdom, and still somewhat today is at least colloquially known for as that in North Korea, but obviously referring to an actual kingdom, because that was kind of stuck between the worlds of Japan and China. It was also geographically isolated from the rest of Europe, and it also kept to that way. I think through similar sort of Confucian attitudes as well, and it also had its protection from China, and until at least I think it's the Treaty of Nerchinsk, when the Russians got to Vladivostok, they're basically only surrounded by China. So they had that same sort of attitude, and surprisingly, they managed to keep that even by, I think there was a punitive expedition by the US, for example, in the 1870s at one point in Korea, which the Koreans actually rebuffed. So they kept their isolation and technically continued to do so, as it was more Japanese influence that started influencing the peninsula up to at least from the start of the First Sino-Japanese War in, I think, 1896. So I think the video did well focusing on that. If there are any other factors you want to talk about, Mr. Gollum?
Yeah, I thought I really liked your little comment there about reviewing history books too, because we all get these like sources, popular history or sources, which are all just based on almost purely on people's wish to how would I put it, like we all get popular history, so like the most popular mega history book we could all think about is Guns, Germs and Steel, something like like Jared Diamond, which obviously later on people have thrown a lot of eggs at for a lot of its plot holes and stuff which doesn't really compensate for a lot of other reasons that Europe dominated the world. It's just that Guns, Germs, Steel, and it's like, okay, sure, purely that. But then there was also it led there was that we have other mega histories now. Like we have it's in the last 10 years there's been things like Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and then there was Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, which summarizes the history of human ideology and thought and then predicts what's going to happen with techno-humanism and stuff like that. And then we also had this book I've read like a bit of, but it's called I think it's called The 10 Types of Human, and it's like this guy, he's a lawyer, but he did a lot of research into all these different types of, like human social science and human psychology to understand different types of human personality and modulate these types of personality into different types of human being. And it's interesting, and I've discovered stuff that I never would have known before reading it. But I also just thought it is like a broad, popular sort of concept, which within the ballpark of things like Nassim Taleb, when he wrote stuff like Anti-Fragility, and you see on the shelves a lot of like people that either think they're CEOs or like they might be on the shelves given as gifts to people who are actual CEOs, but those CEOs never actually touch the book. So it's one of these situations. I say that because there's a friend, Sasquatch's dad. I won't obviously can't reveal any personal details, but he's a well-to-do guy, and he once I was about to sit their place for an event, and his dad shows me, Nassim Taleb, high conceptual, lots of motivational sort of stuff. I've got our friend just gave us like a book of like 10 of his books, and I haven't. There's a whole like box full of the, like 10 of Nassim Taleb's books, and he hasn't like touched them at all. So it just shows like a lot of people who are genuinely quite successful get given these things by people who really want to be successful, and they don't touch them. So I just thought I'd. I can't base my assessment off just purely that, but I won't forget that interaction. I just thought it was quite funny.
Actually, yeah, if I can chime in on that.
Yeah. I thought I thought I'd just also just I mean, I'll pass the Fish and Jish wanted to make a comment, so I'll just pass to him, but then I'll go back to my little monologuing as we do here.
Oh yeah, no, I was ecstatic that you actually mentioned Jared Diamond as well, because I was actually thinking of that. I don't think there's anything particularly like egregious about those sorts of publications. I mean, at least compared to those like Gavin Menzies and practically ancient alien shit you see on History Channel. Jared Diamond, or Uhari, what's his name again? The Sapiens guy.
That's Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah, Yuval Noah Harari. No, there's nothing wrong with them. I remember, I haven't read Guns, Germs and Steel. I do remember the documentary though. That was came out a while ago. Another example though, which is apologies, but I forgot the name of the book, but it was definitely a bestseller and it was called Silk Roads. And I read most of that. So mind you, like anything, there's always something new to learn, even as like a graduate in history, from different sort of perspectives and different writers. So they're not bad on their own, but the problem is a lot of the time, not trying to sound obviously pretentious or anything, but if you're even somewhat slightly on the academic level, a lot of these ideas, though, overall are kind of surface level. But no, I also have to agree, though, I really hate, which is probably one of the reasons I'm not in the sort of academic circles, even though some people think I sort of fit that area, is that sort of snobbery that ends up excluding everyone else. So it's like these people act like, you can only be an aficionado, so-called, of X faculty if you suddenly start with this tome, boom, and like nothing else. But of course, not even they started off learning like that. I mean, as long as it's factual and everything, just just give it in the way that your audience wants it. And I mean everything from like the child to the professor. For example, if you want to teach history to a child or something like that, don't just give them all the dry stuff, because obviously they're going to just be switched off. Give it to them in like bite-sized, almost like story-like ways, but try not to ever dumb down anything per se, and obviously don't make it sort of false. But yeah, sorry, I'll give the mic back to Mr. Gollum on his point.
I know, I like your say. It reminds me of the saying that I learned. I've heard it a few times. It's primary school teachers love their kids, high school teachers love their subject, and university lecturers love themselves. So it's a bit like that, really. And I mean, I've dealt with a little bit of that myself in engineering. I've had some lecturers who thought it was really, really funny in classic 2000s, SQL, database, sort of like, bulletin board troll style, Gen X late boomer sort of character who was a bit of an aficionado for computers. He once gave us an assignment where he didn't want us to process any of the data using Excel, and he wanted us to use MATLAB, which is like a bit more of an advanced numerical numerical methods application. So it's basically just like a big Wolfram Alpha or ChatGPT. You got to code things, and it works similar to Excel, but it just makes massive computations in most like financial services and like investment companies, and you're just big reporters on like financial news use this stuff to like test their models. But anyway, he to make sure that we didn't use Excel, he made the file, the CSV file, like way too large to Excel to process, so it automatically crashes the program every time you try to use the file for the assignment. So the guy was a bit of an asshole, but he was very funny. But made me realize, like, when I was very stressed and I was like an undergrad and that sort of thing, and I've dealt with like subjects I'd flunked before during really stressful periods of my life, I just thought, fuck this asshole. But after I graduated, I thought he was kind of funny. But before I passed that course, I was just thinking, this guy, how does he keep his fucking job? But I just realized, he's actually like, it's just this thing, once you get that tenure, you kind of and then students come and go. You'll get some lecturers who kind of fuck with the students, and they'll just get away with it. So, it's a funny one, really. What was I thinking about when I came to history? Oh yeah, so like, when we look at people like Yuval Harari, Jared Diamond, and those kinds of these mega histories, it's good that they do exist because it certainly attracted my mind to history, and it didn't just. I got really interested as a subject, apart from just talking to my dad, who was really interested in the subject. My dad was a doctor, I'm an engineer. There's these things where you just get interested in history as a subject because you might not be like even your subject because it's such an interesting thing. And if you read the right books, you end up, just watch documentaries, YouTube channels now, podcasts. It's just something you can keep as a kind of like a personal interest and personal hobby. So, but I thought I'd sidetrack a bit. Just so I can let you guys know, in this pilot episode, we're going to have Sunshine Moonlight on, who is a friend of myself and Walt Bismarck. This is 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is a good 14 hours away from the eastern border coast of the United States. So
10 now.
10?
Yeah, it went 10.
Oh, it's 10 p.m. now. Well, we started at 9 p.m. And basically, what ended up happening is, he got a message. He slept through his alarm. So, I'll bring him on for another episode because I still want him on. He's basically, for a bit of context, Sunshine Moonlight, for viewers who don't know him, is he's half Korean, and I think his mother is Korean, and his dad is from the United States. So he did an entire episode with another popular edgelord sort of character on Substack called Walt Bismarck. And Walt Bismarck, I used to watch his Disney parodies back in the day because they were just edgy as all hell. And everyone's an edgy high school at one point. And just that thrill of the edge is something, you could be the most, anti-racist person on the planet if you want to call yourself that, and then still watch his videos and you think, yeah, he's actually quite talented. So it was one of these things where you thought, there was even articles coming out, even the New York Times and stuff like about Walt Bismarck and how talented he was, even though he was effectively just making like really, really crazy blog. He was getting the most fringe blogs on the internet, kind of like edgy blogs on the internet, making them into Disney parodies. But people had acknowledged there was some talent to some of the lyrics he was writing, and even me as like a Jewish person, he was making so many jokes about Jews, which were just so over the top, cartoonishly hilarious, which I found quite funny, especially during stressful periods of my life. So I don't know, there was something, me and Sasquatch, we talk about that. We have got somewhat Jewish heritage. I've got half Jewish heritage, like a quarter. We were showing it that Oy Vey song around, and we're all just having a big laugh about that kind of stuff, and we could all laugh at that stuff because it's just so ridiculous and so over the top. And here I am down under just laughing at this random American guy, based in some border town like Arizona, just making these stupid songs with like poor editing software. It was great. So anyway, Walt Bismarck and Sunshine Moonlight did an excellent. They've done an excellent set of episodes on things like. Passport bros to Korea. He's half Korean, and he speaks fluent Korean and fluent English. So he lived in Korea for a lot of his life, in his adult life, and he's moved back to the States because he's had to deal with some personal family dramas. But originally I was going to tune up with him in Korea, which is only like a 1 hour or two behind Australia, similar to Japan. They're in another season because of the Northern Hemisphere, but they're only like an hour or two behind Sydney, which is great. Which means you can coordinate a lot easier. And that's why we all like to play on Asia Pacific servers in Australia, or we get a lot of Asian players coming to us to play in Australia on gaming servers because it's just it's just very close time zone. You go to the States, you got a very large ping, so you tune into Asia, American servers very often. But I'd say about the reason he's done some great episodes. If you want to check out anything by Sunshine Moonlight and Walt Bismarck, excellent discussions on Passport Bros. Despite the fact his mum is Korean, and dad's, like, conventional white American. He was talking about how shit passport bros are, but obviously he's like half based on the fact that his dad had found like a Korean wife. But he has some interesting perspective, being a half kid himself, dealing with like actual, like, seeing that stuff roll out today in a much more popular day of the internet, like all, these people just go on Instagram, I'm just gonna find myself a Korean wife sort of blokes, and it's just like, oh Jesus Christ, they're all everywhere now. And just, if he's did an episode of that, he's done a lot of history. I don't know what his major is, but he did a history. He's great at like public policy stuff. He's great at his Asian history stuff. So he would have been great to, and he watched the video too. So I'll bring him on for another thing. But he's a really great guy. And the thing is that there might be people on Substack who, like, there'll be, I know a lot of left wing people on Substack. Fish and Jish is quite left wing. My views used to be more right wing. I've got some views which are more interesting, but a lot of my economic views are on the left now. And there's some other views I'm quite more progressive on these days, and there's other things. Obviously, I've wrote a whole series, trying to like defend the reputation of Curtis Yarvin. So obviously, there's part of me which likes to still entertain the edgelord and give the edgelords a fair hearing. So I'm not exactly like some sort of pure leftist, But then again, if I ever was, or if some pure rightist in any regard, if I was doing either of those things, I think I'd probably be my own worst enemy in that regard. I'd be the worst person I hate, because I'm always constantly criticizing that kind of ideological purity, anyways. But I thought I'd bring up this I was going to invite this guy on, because look, it would have been great. But he'll be on for the next episode, I assure that, or an episode after this. I'll pass to Fish and Jish, because I'm trying to plug his Substack a little bit, because I've actually had a lot of good time with his stuff. He wrote a history on the wars between Japan and like Korea, and he wrote a bit on Kosovo and the disputed territories there. These kinds of topics are very interesting on the internet. There's another guy called Britannica who if you guys watch the Lotus Eaters, or if you guys know Sargon of Akkad, from back in the day, he has a thing called the Lotus Eaters now, and he had a guy invited on for a while. He was like a panelist called Callum, and he runs his own channel called Britannica, and Britannica does great historical videos and dark tourism videos from different perspectives, and he just doesn't, you wouldn't understand that he was like working with Sargon for a while, because his videos are like just so much more educational than just opinionated purely.
Work with Sargon.
And like I'll probably but and so I guess like I'll just I'd talk about that, because he's done some stuff on Kosovo and Serbia and all that. But I'll pass on. It's just a popular topic on the internet. I guess I just thought so. I'll pass to Fish and Jish now, because you've heard me rabbit for a bit.
I want to say no to Mr. Gollum. Yeah, thanks for introducing me for that. Yeah, no, very kind. Mr. Gollum's articles are definitely worth a read as well. He does some story writing in his own way, and I've seen some of his sort of political takes too, which I can largely agree. I'll probably just say as well, yeah, even as a Substack nobody in comparison to these big guys, I wouldn't mind being on a podcast with Sunshine otherwise, but I don't obviously mind doing more sort of chats with Mr. Gollum as well. Makes it easier for us to put out our views and get a discussion going as well, without putting in the time for an article, which I obviously do, but that takes time. But yeah, if we're plugging a bit here, I'm writing an article at the moment on the importance of memorials in history, and also the zeitgeist of culture. And that's everything from like war memorials to what happened with all the sort of statue movement in BLM. There's some sort of political things there, so watch for that. And probably, yeah, because I've sometimes dabbled in sort of espionage as well, like that. Like I've got an article or two on James Bond, but usually affected on history. Probably one of the few times I'm going to go a bit outside of my area of expertise, though, is I was going to write about at least how well done the entity was written about, at least in the first part of what was originally Dead Reckoning Part 1, but just became Dead Reckoning, and how that sort of does a good job of showing the sort of dangers of AI, when usually AI is either something that's not shown in movies much, or if it is, it's almost entirely relegated to the sci-fi. I'd also like to say as well, I am probably overall more left-wing, but obviously so in many areas. But the funny thing is, I would like to say as well, yes, I'm probably like Mr. Gollum as well, in that I don't really like ideological purity. In fact, I'd probably go to say it's bloody pointless, because I think most things in the world need pragmatism, because things change. There's rarely a one-size-fits-all. But I would say I'm left-wing enough that just most forms of testing and sort of debates you're on, I'm going to be left-wing. But I am definitely not left-wing enough that, let's say I'd probably still be kind of controversial for campus politics, which, to be fair, isn't saying much. That's like saying, you're prone to accidentally setting bombs off, kind of thing. As in, like, if you accidentally touch a bomb, it's likely going to explode. It's not really saying much. But I'd say I'm overall relatively progressive. I just don't like, which I will write a bit about in my upcoming memorials article, I don't like this sort of more far leftism, sometimes overly activisty sort of politics and all that. Also somebody else we'd probably like to get on our podcast at some point is, as Mr. Gollum has introduced before on this podcast, is Sasquatch. He's another one of our friends who've known for quite a few years. Though I don't think he's put up any articles yet. He usually comments some funny stuff, though, on both our sort of Substacks. We would also like to get him to come on here and have a talk with us. Yeah. I pass the thing back to Mr. Gollum on any sort of finishing touches, I guess.
Yeah, cheers. We'll see how it goes with this. We've been looking to go for an hour and a half. We're at 41 minutes and we've already covered a fair bit of ground. I want to still kind of go on for this, but it is late night, so we'll see how it goes with this. But on that note, like, I thought I'd talk a little bit about Sasquatch. We've known him for a bit. He's actually he's got a very interesting story himself. He can tell himself his own story, like how much I guess he wants to share about his own life will be his own thing. But we always knew him as like he's a guy who, what I can share is he's another Australian, and he's dealt with a lot. We've all seen, like, political scene. We've at uni watched this campus politics stuff unfold, and he's always been like, he was like one of these kids in the grade who like was just kind of like one of the like the big edgelords. He had like a very severe, like, he had a disability. So he was one of these. He had a disability, but he didn't want to be defined by his disability. So he kind of had this outrageous personality, which he wanted people to kind of treat him as he was, face value, which was a strategy which was always interesting. But he makes for a very interesting person, and once you get past the fence of barbed wire, it's like they say in the heavy metal community, as Winston McCall says in Parkway Drive. The heavy metal community is a very lovely community, but it's they've wrapped in an outside shell of barbed wire with a soft core inside. So outside is barbed wire, and you see the walls of death. You see these mosh pits when people pass out. But the thing is, as soon as someone passes out, people picking people back up and stuff like that. So if you get to know figures like that who might seem a bit rough around the edges, edgy, that sort of thing. Yeah, like, the thing is you might be judged for trying to like get to know them and stuff like that, because barbed wire, you touch them, you start bleeding. But the thing is, you got to understand how to handle these things, and you can actually get to understand someone quite well, and they're actually quite interesting and quite lovely people when you really get to know them, and you can see another perspective on life which you don't really consider. So that's what I'm interested at Sasquatch. And he's got his profile picture as the typical online Australian cartoon of the Big Les Show, which was made by a high school student during the global financial crisis. So after the global financial crisis, the government gave out these Lenovo laptops to every student, and he gets his Lenovo laptop and starts making MS Paint cartoons and uploading them to YouTube. And he called it the Big Les Show, and it was out in butfuck middle of nowhere, New South Wales country, in a town called Lismore, which is it's half the time it's been underwater for the past 5 years. It's been underwater for the past like 5 years or so. So
I do have to say, wasn't it Tweed Heads actually?
Tweed Heads.
Yeah, I thought it was Tweed Heads. That he
did the
show guy Jared Wright. I thought it was Tweed Heads.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was Lismore. So, not to worry. Lismore is another town like this, which Lismore is a very interesting place because it's middle of nowhere, and it's narrow. Even some towns by the beach, they don't have a lot. They might, but the great place to visit. You're in Australia, you're taking a camper van or a Greyhound bus, they'll put you off there. But the main thing you'll find as well when when you're going to these towns is, unless you're just visiting, if you're living there, it's not, if you grow up there, there's not a lot to do. Like, it might be the most picturesque spot in the world, but I've been told the only fun things you can do there, especially just out of the summer season, is when people make money during the summer tourism. After that, it's dead. It's just drugs, cars, and booze. And then, I was in Southern Highlands, which is like one of the most beautiful parts of New South Wales. You can see a lot of retirees and that go there. They go for a tree change because it's a bit like the Highlands of Scotland. But you go there, and like I go to this place called Bundanoon, which is like this Scottish town out in Southern Highlands of New South Wales, and they have this old mansion, like this old manor, which they say was haunted at one point. It's just part of like apparently some kid in the 1800s died there, and they turned it into a big narrative. But it's actually it's a fun place. And then I see some people in the poker machine section of the bar associated with that hotel, and they told me they drove in from like some town which is like in the Southern Highlands, which is not a lot going on there, and they drove to this place just to play the pokies in the middle of winter. And they told me the best thing that happens at the town sometimes is when they have weddings, and then they'll just rock up and try to make out with the guests. It was just like insane that like this kind of thing happens. So like there's a reason like the Big Les Car Show and this kind of Australian humour of, yeah, mate, just have to do it, mate. Yeah, come on, mate. It's just these eccentric personalities you meet. Like these kids I saw in the poker machine section of just this random New South Wales, country pub. So you get these stories. You just can't make them up. It's like America's full of kooky personalities. But you've got to meet see these Australian cartoons, and some of these just eccentric people you meet in Australia. Once you meet them, you'll know them. And if you grow up in Australia, you start to understand. You meet just the lives they live. That you start to understand. Oh yeah, that's why you're messed up. Not to be mean to them, but it's just like that's kind of just is literally the life they live. So you can't, who you're to judge in some ways. It's an interesting one though.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with Mr. Gollum there about the Australian sort of nature. I will admit though, like. No, I personally find it enjoyable, but some things are a little bit hard to translate with that sort of humor overseas, though. Like, I don't know if I'm allowed profanity in this podcast, Mr. Gollum.
Go ahead,
that there's a lot of, let's just say, there's a lot of cunts used in the show, the Big Les Show. But outside of that, no. Mr. Gollum is absolutely correct about the sort of stereotypes there, like particularly the tradie stereotypes. Like most tradies, like I would say where most people have that stereotype of Australians going, "Oh, good day, mate," or "You're getting a bit blotto," or all that sort of stuff. Like Daniel Ricciardo from the Australian Grand Prix, for example, has that accent like down pat. You don't usually hear that in the city, but if you get like proper working class people like tradies, they will talk like that. Like it's pretty funny, and they've got a lot of that sort of stereotype down pat as well, So I think the guy is Nigel or Nige, he's got like the Southern Cross tattoo, which also has a interesting sort of historical perspective in Australia as well. Like it represents like the unions, because it goes back to the gold rush and a sort of rebellion that even some historians now are considering almost like the equivalent of a national revolution for workers' rights. Has kind of got hijacked now though by that kind of sort of patriot sort of fuck off we're full crowd sort of thing. But they've got the tradies there, and Big Les himself, I suppose, is more like the suburban sort of Queensland type guy. So this was shot in. I'm almost certain it's Tweed Heads, because Jared Wright, the sort of creator of the show, which as Mr. Gollum said, was done on MS Paint amazingly, still is. He shows a lot of the times pictures of the Gold Coast in the back, and in some episodes they go to the Gold Coast. It's going back to Jared Wright's sort of childhood. Well, not just childhood, lifestyle, which I think is a pretty funny perspective too. Because Tweed Heads is like also named after like a Scottish town area, I believe, like Bundanoon. Is kind of like one of those country towns. It's on the border between New South Wales and Queensland, so you kind of get that more parochial feel in Australian standards. Like Mr. Gollum said, like pretty much just the booze and the driving and the drugs and not much else. And then the Gold Coast on the other side, that may as well be like what would the equivalent be? What's that place, Mr. Gollum, in America that has like it's almost like a Las Vegas but on the coast in America, not Miami. I think it's called like Palm Springs or Palm.
Oh, you're testing my knowledge there. My American geography's not the best, but there's like there's like it would probably be somewhere in Florida. I mean, someone in the comments could definitely, if they're paying attention to this stuff, could definitely give me some pointers. Send me a message or leave a comment after. Filling in our knowledge on that one. But
Miami's
Miami's close enough anyway. That's sort of same vibe, like very glitzy, probably higher rollers. It's not entirely a gambling place, although it does have a casino, but it's very much like that. So it's like two very different worlds there. Also, it's not just Jared Wright and the Big Les show that does all the Australian stuff either. Also, before I move on that, the Big Les show does actually allude also to Aboriginal culture, actually. So Sasquatch, his profile is Sassy the Sasquatch from the Big Les show as well, and they're Yowies, who are like basically Australian Bigfoot, as they say in the show, and they're also a famous Cadbury chocolate that came here, which is like the Australian Kinder Surprise, and arguably represent is way better than Kinder Surprise. But another show that's a bit more realistic is Damo and Darren by Michael Cusack, who's actually big now with a show called Smiling Friends. And they also he collaborated with an American group called Sleepy Cabin, or at least some of those groups there. But anyway, Damo and Darren is very much that is definitely a lot more obviously based in real places in Australia. I think when you look it up, it's based on like Dapto Station, Albion Park, Unanderra, and those places are in real life as well. That's in Wollongong. That's like an industrial area. And so Wollongong is like practically a city now, but it's got that country feel. And Unanderra is like more of the hardline industry there. And Damo and Darren exactly that, the Centrelink doll bludgers, as we call them, the types that don't do any work. They sort of scab off public money They just do stupid shit and they talk like, bogus, give me back me lawyer, talking like that sort of thing. You fucking dumb, fucking ciggy butt brain, that sort of stuff. So they got that sort of bogan. It's basically bogan Centrelink attitude, which is pretty hilarious. But yeah.
I thought I'd add a bit more to that. So Michael Cusack, yeah, Damo and Darren is probably one of the best ones of these Australian online cartoons, which did well for itself. That you can see. There's another guy. There's another big guy. He actually was ended up being the storyboarders for Bluey for a while, and his name is used to be Sexual Lobster, but now it's Greasy Tails. And he just makes a lot of very messed up sort of stuff. And he's also Queensland based, and I think it just must be the fact that like the heat gets their head up there. But down in New South Wales, Michael Cusack, he set it all around the southern coast city of Wollongong. So in New South Wales, you've got Sydney, which is the most populous and expensive city in Australia. Then you've got Newcastle up the north, and then Wollongong down the south. And then a lot of my family grew up in the Georges River area of Sydney, so it's like Cronulla and like Sutherland and that sort of thing. But then on my mum's side of the family, and then Cronulla is, it's an interesting place because obviously it's just west of there on the Georges River. You have like, a lot of those like refugee communities that have been set up and like places that came from the Middle East, and big divide in culture between like the east where the beach is and to the west where like a lot of these newer communities have been developed. And it's a bit like there's a lot that's like gotten a lot better in recent years, but there was like this rough, tense history between the two areas along the Georges River, which is like, or even in the Georges River area in general. There's just a lot of interesting history. And my grandfather was actually a cop in that area around Cronulla for in the 50s and 60s during 70s, 80s, during 70s and 80s, mainly during like Roger Rogerson era. He was growing up in the 50s, 60s, but he was like a cop in that time, a detective, and it's just a very interesting guy. His father was an Estonian seaman who came here in the early 1900s, so we all have very interesting histories in Australia. And I guess down in Wollongong, it's one of Wollongong and like Newcastle. They used to have massive industries in shipping and coal and steel, but everything's shut down up in Newcastle, and so there's a lot of unemployment in Central Coast Newcastle way, and a lot of the only kind of employment they have up there is like if it's not like Sydney expats, and like foreigners coming there. It's like in a tourist season for the beach. It's just literally just there's literally just go to the cinema and like maybe go for a drive, maybe do some bushwalks, and that's about it. And then the rest is like there's so much alcoholism and drugs up there. But down in Wollongong, at least they kept the steel industry. They didn't offshore that, so the government supported a lot of that. And yeah, like you look at it, you go to Blue Scope Steelworks in Port Kembla, which is near Wollongong. And like it's stuff from the 60s, like it's technology from the 60s, but it's keeping a lot of money coming through Wollongong, so it's not completely derelict, or it's not. There's still a lot of opportunity there compared to the Newcastle Coast. Newcastle Coast has gotten a lot better in recent years. They still got like the gas plants and that, but down in Wollongong, you've got some of these areas which are like southwest of Wollongong, which are a little bit away from the beach. Dapto is near the beach, but some of these places that you just get all the end of the line, all the the derelicts kind of show up there. It's a bit tragic. They all kind of just congregate, and there are a lot of the government housings there, and you just get these characters interacting with one another. And oh my god, it is like some of the interactions you see. I was, how would you say it? Like it's become so popular now that like cousins of ours who will live in Wollongong are all going to like check out those original sites where like those places were set. So Michael Cusack and Friendly Geordies, the other popular Australian YouTuber, recreated the first episode of of Zemo and Darren at Dapto Station in live action recently. And they uploaded that. It actually was quite a good reenactment. And down in the second episode's over in I think it's Unanderra skate. No, I think it's Unanderra skate park, or as we know in the Wollongong, where my mum's now living. We call it Unanderra. Mum doesn't want to call it that, but it's called. But the Wollongong locals call it Unanderra. So it's there's a lot of interesting names given to places, and it's just interesting. Like my brother went down on a road trip down to Nowra, as you do. I mentioned Nowra earlier. Check out Nowra.
Nowra's so depressing.
Yeah. What you can see when you're in Nowra is you can see. He saw like a storm drain, and some people have just tied up all these plush animals, including Kermit. And there's just this very depressing, rotting Kermit plush just tied to the draining of a storm drain. And it's just like, oh my god, this place is cursed. Pass it to Fish and Jish. He's got any funny stories from country Australia, from, just for shits and gigs.
Yeah, no doubt I do. Yeah, like, I agree. That's a very good point, Miss Gollum, on Wollongong keeping some of its steel areas there, because I've been to Wollongong a few times now, fairly recently. I've been the first time much longer ago. I used to have some family friends out there in Bulli region, so a lot of areas of Wollongong are actually not badly off compared to just say Newcastle as well, which Mr. Gollum is also absolutely right about, because I recently went to Queen Wharf, which used to be one of the main waterfronts in Newcastle, with a tower there called the Queen Elizabeth Tower, which was also definitely opened by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth back in the day. It also happens to be the terminus of the Great Northern Walk, which is this massive, fairly long hiking walk you can do all the way from, well, ultimately the CBD in Sydney, but pretty much Hunters Hill in Sydney, all the way to Newcastle and Queen Wharf. So for the frottage, it's supposed to be, well, it should be like premier sort of land, but it's like literally a lot of it's abandoned now. It's just like graffitied and all that sort of stuff. So it's a bit more depressing there compared to say Wollongong. But I'd also agree with which place did you say before, Mr. Gollum, on the last place you're talking about?
Was this over in like Newcastle way, Central Coast, or were we talking
something near Unanderra?
Unanderra, Unanderra,
or the one after that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's the big ones are like, well, Ferry Meadow used to be like it, but Ferry Meadow's gotten a lot better. It's actually quite a big Italian community over at Ferry Meadow in Wollongong, which is cool. But
no, the town after that. You said something outside of Wollongong.
Okay, yeah. So what we also have is so Sydney, Wollongong, and then just the next big city below that is like something like, well, it's Port Kembla. And then Shell Harbour, but they're like quite big, and they're all literally just bigger suburbs of Wollongong.
Oh, no, sorry, Nowra.
Yeah, Nowra, and Nowra is
yeah, just south of.
Oh yeah, it's just south of Wollongong, and it's a small town, and there's not a lot going on there, and it's nice and by the beach. You can go to some caravan parks and book some holiday houses. But the next big town down is like Kiama, and so there's a lot of these places, especially in Central Coast. There's these small towns. And you can get some really nice Airbnbs and stuff there, but it's if you're not there in summer, I mean, or if you just get to see, if you stay there and you work there, especially as a GP or a teacher or something like that, and you get a placement there, there's like migrants who come here and do nursing work, and they just get placed out in Nowra to get boosts on their visas if they're doing countryside work, or even just studying and nursing and doctor work, being a GP.
What you said with
I'll pass it over to Fish and Jish, but it's like you have to do that work there, and it just gets fucking depressing. I'll just pass it to Fish though.
Mr. Gollum was asking me about my experience at those places. Nowra is definitely ridiculously depressing. Like I went there, I think I was just touring around the train route at one point there. Now is the terminus actually of the Sydney Country Link. And I was just thinking, like, it's also so out the way. It's for some reason it's on like a line of about 4 or 5 stations that are serviced by another line that's from a diesel train only. So it's all that sort of weird shit. But Nowra was so depressing. It was like, I started realizing, like, literally made it a game, like counting the sort of the demographic age of the people, because it felt like the median age was like 60 or 70, and then it was like, just like some sort of rotting Darrow houses. It's just like, sort of really shitty area. And I don't know why Australia's like that. I guess it doesn't help, like Mr. Gollum said before, that everyone is mainly in like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, etc. Mainly the state capitals. A few others in places like Wollongong and Newcastle and all. Otherwise, Australia is actually the second least densely populated country in the world, with the least being Mongolia, which is, that's basically like the when people think of Mongolia, they think of nomadic empires. So I think a lot of Australian towns are pretty damn depressing in that sense. In fact, I remember a show from about 10 years ago or maybe a bit longer, actually, 15 or 20 years ago, on $2 towns in Australia, in which they got people as an incentive to come live in a place called Trundle, which has the most, tumbleweed sounding name possible. Got people there to live for $2 or something. Yeah. Otherwise, for me, that'll otherwise probably be my last note there after this interesting conversation with Mr. Gollum, because it's getting kind of late here, and obviously it's pretty much an introductory talk. Hopefully next time too, we'll because we had some sort of difficulties in the IT here, if you will, to have a better sort of more back and forward conversation, of course. But otherwise, this has been Fish and Jish, and it's been great to talk tonight. And I'm very thankful that Mr. Gollum has invited me to his first podcast.
Oh, that's exactly it. It's I mean, it is getting a bit late here, and then I'm using a software called Riverside FM, which I'm on the free plan, because, as you know, why do Jews have big noses? Because the air is free. Why am I using a free plan? Because it lets me have up to 2 hours free recording, so I'm just going to do that until I earn some money, and then I'm probably going to go for the long, the premium option. But it's one of these things where, Australia is one of the least densely populated countries. But the thing is, the reason, and I hate to say it, the reason everyone's talking about fucking immigration now, and it's become such a hot topic, is because of the fact that our civilizations, like our infrastructure and city infrastructure, is so heavily densely populated around the coasts. And so people just want to come where all the opportunity is. And so it's just like people will literally just flock there. And because that's the case, like, we now, as I've written in my recent article about, the HSC, as my fellow Substacker who's based in Brisbane, who's is an urbanist, who's a fellow construction and engineering, and he's an urban designer, but he's writes about the housing crisis, and he's fucking brilliant, and he talks about a lot of topics on housing project delivery and things like construction workers and the need for tradies. Like, we need immigration, but we need targeted immigration into areas we really need it. We can't have more people, filling up building more Maccas. We don't need more Maccas. We don't need more, holiday houses. We don't need more people who are doing, marketing and recruitment. Recruitment maybe, but we don't need more marketing. We don't need more. We don't need endless Uber drivers. We need to have tradies. And that's the thing, is there's not all these houses, especially in Brisbane. Brisbane's in a real housing shortage because they got to build for the Olympics. They got the fact that there's not enough housing. There's so much going on. And the thing is, it's just like, he writes brilliant stuff, and one of his articles I have yet to read is called "Why We Should Build Train Stations in the Middle of Nowhere," and it's explaining that, just going back to Fisher's story about Nowra, and there's these just trains that stop. Nowra's on the coast. It's on the coast. It's not even inland. We don't have that many trains that go inland. Like, you have to take a truck or a bus or you have to fly. Like, you can't really take any trains. And the only trains that go really inland like that are tourist trains, like the GAN. So the one that was built by Afghani workers about 200 years ago, which is outdated for tourists and stuff. But you have to pay like close to $1,000 to go on it. It's a tourist train.
Oh, at least.
Yeah, it's a tourist train. And the thing is, you can't take it as a regular work if you want to go from Darwin to Adelaide. It's at least a couple $1,000s. And my mum's been on it with a partner of hers. And she said, great. It was like a premier service. It's like literally like a steam train from like the 1800s. It was built by Afghani like labourers that the British Empire brought in. But the thing is like, you can't take it. You can't take it as a local unless you like go on a special occasion. You do need to build train lines in the middle of nowhere. We need that investment. And the thing is, it's mental. Where the US is so much better of a situation with this because they built all these train lines around the whole damn country, and it just boomed their economy. Like, those train lines were part of the reason, but the fact that they were able to ship coal and oil and ship all these supplies from the East Coast to the West Coast so quickly is partly the reason they're the world superpower. And here, Australia, we've got the same land mass as the mainland United States. Yeah, we've got less arable land, but we had more train lines. We'd be in a much happier situation, but we're not. So it's ridiculous. You need a car. You do need a car in this country, and it's ridiculous. Anyway, I've wrapped it up a bit. I'm gonna get Fish and he's gonna help me out on this episode. I'm kind of stitching him up to do this, but after we do this, I'm going to see if he can remember. I'll go through the transcripts, and then I'll also get him to try and remember some of the show notes and help me generate a cross-reference of what we've covered in this great episode. And we'll have Sunshine Moonlight on for one of the next episodes, and we're going to have a lot of fun time. So this has been the Contemplation Deck with the Stern Golem. This has been hopefully a recurring guest in Fish and Jish, and keep thinking. Keep reflecting, and all opinions are your own discretion, even if you hold them for 5 seconds. Thank you.
And with extrasensory perception, our love will be refined. Since our affair had its inception, I can't get you out of my mind. There is no chance of a deception. How dull it's gonna be. Let's go find two normal people. Baby, stop thinking at me.
What was that you thought?